Welcome back to another episode of Junkie with Junior. Got some side-by-side action today to work on. So we got the Kawasaki Teryx here, and it's got a little bit of a problem, and it's kind of a manufacturing defect, I think. So we're going to be upgrading some shocks and springs on this. So we went with some Elkas. But before we get into that cool box of stuff, I want to show you what's going on underneath. So underneath here, we've got Fox shocks, which come on these from the factory. And you can see down here very little bit of travel from the bottom of the body of the shock to the bump stop down in here inside the spring cup. So minimal travel. So this is actually a QA1 spring that we put on here, a 325 rate, so a little heavier than the factory one, because the factory one was just super squish and marshmallow, and it was just bottoming out all the time. You'd hit the slightest bump and it would bottom out, especially if you had 4 people in here, whether it was 4 adults or 2 adults, 2 kids, whatever the combination, it was just too much for those factory springs. So we had put these springs on here, and that helped it out a ton. That got a lot of sag out of it and gave us some travel there, but they still bottom out. So we're gonna upgrade this thing with some Elka shocks and coilovers. What a nice piece this is. So Elka shock and spring coilover assembly here. Now these are a 305 rate spring, and the ones that we'd put on to replace the factories were a 325. Now remember, we did that just to try to make the best of what we had, and you can only go so far on this coilover adjustment here, and you get to the point that then the shock's just not long enough, period. So that's the main problem with those. But you can see, look how much more travel we have on this spring on this spring and shock assembly before it bottoms out. We got a long ways to go. So of course it's uncompressed right now, and the weight is on this one, I understand that, but big difference, and we'll take a look at that as soon as we get it bolted on. So this was actually a kit that we got from Hester's Motorsports. Great company to work with. They want to know the weight of the people that are riding in the buggy with you, so that they have a better idea of what springs and valving to put in your shocks for you. So really know what they're doing. They know what's going on. And you can't actually get these direct from Elka. You can, but they won't be set up for you. So if you wanted to get into all your custom valving and stuff like that, yeah, you can do that. Or the easy way to do it is call Hester's. They know what they're doing, and they set you up with the spring and valving that you need to support the weight of your buggy. One more thing, because we do have a much higher quality shock and spring assembly here now, you don't want to overextend them. So in the event that you have 1, 2, 3, 4 tires, whatever, off of the ground, you want to have some limiting straps. So we're going to put some of those on as well, and it's just a limiter. So if the shock, it prevents the shock from overextending. You don't have to worry about damaging anything if you stretch it out all the way. So got a few of those to put on each corner while we're putting on the shocks and springs. Another important thing, make sure to do this when you're on level ground, because we are going to be jacking up the rear of this thing. So if you had the e-brake set, it's going to be ineffective whenever you start jacking up the rear, and you have to jack it up in the middle so that we can completely unload the suspension. There we go. Tires off the ground. Now we can, actually, you don't even really need to remove the tires. I don't know why I was going to do that. It might make life a little easier, but clearly you can get to all this stuff right here. So we're going to leave the tires on it. All right, so we got both nuts off those bolts. Now remember, the tire's off the ground. We're going to set it down a little bit to take the tension off of that bolt from where the suspension sagged down. So we're going to go just till it touches and stop, and voila, you pull that bolt right out of there that way. Grab that shock, boy. Okay, pull her out of there. And just like that, it's free. So since the new assembly is longer, I'm going to kind of line it up with this bottom hole here. You can see how far off we are at the top. So we can jack it up and let our suspension sag some, and now we can push it in there and everything lines up. But we have to do with the new hardware, because we are putting the limit strap on it, remember, so we don't kill it. Minor detail, we can't quite install that bolt because it hits the bracket up top here. So that bottom corner that's hanging down, we're just going to trim it off with a cutoff wheel, hit it with some paint so that it doesn't rust instantly, and then we should be okay. And it's free. All right, now we can let down on our jack. We take this bolt out. Closer, let's let it down some more. Okay, get it low riding here. Now this is almost straight. Back off on that spring some more. Okay, jack it back up for us, Weston. We gotta back this off a little bit more. Okay, that's good, that's good. Okay. Get this bolt wiggled out of here. All right, ease it back down. Jack it back up a little bit. A little bit. A little bit. A little bit. All right. Ooh. A little bit of a wrestling act here. Okay. All right, so that one is installed. Now the only thing we have to do is jack it back up to unload the spring, and then we can turn down that nut back to where it was. I don't really know where we want this thing to be as far as ride height, you know, or preload as they call it, but I'll put it back to where the factory had this one adjusted. Since they do so many of them, I know it's going to be in the ballpark. So we'll just measure from here to here. I'll turn it down and we'll tighten up that little set screw, and then we've got a good starting point. All right, so the back end is complete now. We got both our shocks on, both our limiting straps. You can see they've got a little slack in them while it's sitting at ride height. And if you put 4 people in it, it's gonna squish down a little bit and you have a little bit more. But look down here at how much more shock travel we have than what we started with. Probably 2.5 or 3 times as much as we had started with, so quite a bit. Now I did not run this all the way down to where the factory had it. They had it a little bit further. We went with 1.5 inch gap from the bottom of this gland here to the top of this nut. That's a good starting point, I think. You know, we're gonna put a few miles on this thing, bounce it down some roads and you know, off-road, run it over some hills and get everything to settle a little bit, if you will, and then we can double check everything and see how the buggy's sitting, if it looks tight and right the way it is. So onto the front end, repeat the same process, and then we'll go. Okay, so we got the front installed, so all 4 corners have brand new Elka shocks, and it's time to get this thing out, put a couple miles on it, run over some hills, let all the suspension settle and everything, make sure it's good and comfy where it's going to be. Then we can fine tune any ride height if we need to, and after all that's squared away, then we've got to reset the toe on our front tires to make sure that's 100%, because I don't know if we're going to be at the same height we were, and anytime you change the height of the front end, it's going to change the toe, so we need to dial that in. So let's go for a test drive. Built. So I got my main man Weston here doing a little test drive for us. This thing handles so much better. We aren't even doing any major off-road, and we're just climbing this little dirt hill that we've got in our backyard. I can't believe how much difference it is already. It's going to be really nice when we get it on some trails and start thrashing on this thing a little bit. It's going to be much better. So it's not just for the comfort of ride that we did this. So Weston, he's actually had a few back surgeries in his lifetime already. So whenever we do go riding, he's sitting in the back. He's so close to the top of the axle that whenever we've come down on some bumps, it really jars his back and just completely shuts him down in pain. So I thought, well, this is kind of ridiculous that I'd put my son through that much pain on accident, of course. But you know what? It's time to do some upgrades, make this thing a lot more comfortable. And now that he's getting older, he can put a few miles on this machine himself. So that'll do it for this one. Thanks for watching Junkin' with Junior. Hope y'all enjoyed it. We will see you next time.